evidence, the best indicator of a healthy diet was not how many calories it has or how much fat and salt and sugar, but simply this: was it cooked by a human being or was it cooked by an industrial corporation? So between those two things, I realized that cooking as a subject, which takes place between the farm and the body, it's where we take the things of nature, transform them into meals, was a link in the food chain I needed to examine and explore. And so I began this quest, as I always do. As you suggested in my writing, I make my home a laboratory. And I go out from there, but I like to put myself in my stories and learn so that the reader can learn along with me. So I set about learning how to cook. And by cook, I don't just mean make dinner or lunch or breakfast. I mean learn how to bake bread, learn how to ferment beer, learn how to make cheese, all these transformations. And that's the journey I've been on. It's been a journey of incredible pleasure. You know, some of my work has taken you to very dark places, like Omnivore's Dilemma, parts of it. You know, ugly landscapes, frightening landscapes. This one is, for the most part, a very hopeful book. And the reason I did it this way was because I didn't want to simply make a lecture, an argument for the importance of cooking, even though I think cooking is one of the most important human activities we perform. And that's not an exaggeration. It is the key to connecting with nature, and it is the key to connecting with one another, and it is the key to our health. So that was the project, and it was a long journey, and we can talk about it in more detail. But I thought I would start by just reading you two or three paragraphs, so you get a flavor of the kinds of questions I was seeking to answer. And this is from the very beginning of Cooked. Why cook? At a certain point in the late middle of my life, I made the unexpected but happy discovery that the answer to several of the questions that most occupied me was in fact one and the same. Cook. Some of these questions were personal. For example, what was the single most important thing we could do as a family to improve our health and general well-being? And what would be a better way to connect to my teenage son? As it turned out, this involved not only ordinary cooking, but also the specialized form of it known as brewing. Other questions were slightly more political in nature. For years, I had been trying to determine, because I am often asked, what is the most important thing an ordinary person can do to help reform the food system, to make it healthier and more sustainable? Another related question is, how can people living in a highly specialized consumer economy reduce their sense of dependence and achieve a greater degree of self-sufficiency? And then there were the more philosophical questions, the ones I've been chewing on since I first started writing. How in our everyday lives can we acquire a deeper understanding of the natural world and our species' peculiar role in it? You can always go to the woods to confront such questions, but I discovered that even more interesting answers could be had simply by going to the kitchen. Thank you.
E o livro faz essa exploração do território da cozinha, né? Mas também não só, você vai além, você chegou a trabalhar como fazendeiro, para um fazendeiro da Virgínia, né? Você trabalhou no cultivo dos alimentos. Como foi essa experiência de trabalhar sob a orientação desse produtor familiar?
Yeah, you're referring to a brilliant visionary farmer named Joel Salatin, who I wrote about in Omnivore's Dilemma. And again, I very much like to get my hands dirty when I'm doing work, doing my journalism. I like to write from the perspective of someone who has direct involvement, because I think very often the journalist perspective is very easy. It's very easy to be cynical if you're a journalist, because you're on the sidelines and you don't have any skin in the game, as we say. So I went to work on this farm, and it's in Virginia, and in the Shenandoah Valley, and it's a very unusual farm in that he's growing 6 different animal species together in a very intricate dance that he choreographs. And he's got grass-fed cattle, and he's got pork, and he's got chickens, both roasters and laying hens, and sometimes he has sheep and he has rabbits. And every animal is in a symbiotic relationship with every other animal. So that, to give you one example of these relationships, the cattle spend a day in a paddock that he creates with this very inexpensive electronic fencing. So I could put a paddock, a quarter acre, eighth of a hectare paddock together in 10 minutes and carry the fencing on my back. And you plug it into a car battery, and they spend one day there, and then the cattle move to the next paddock. Every night they move, and they've mowed down the grass, and then he waits 3 days, and then he moves a portable chicken coop into the same paddock. And the reason he does that is because the chickens then spill out of their portable home. They have like a mobile home, and hundreds of them, and they spread out over the grass, and they go right for the cow patties, the manure of the cows. And the reason is that their favorite food in the world are the grubs or the larvae of the flies that are always with cows. And they pick through the manure and they spread it out. Joel calls them his sanitation crew. And they eat all the grubs, so he doesn't have a fly problem. He controls his flies without pesticides, okay? And then they fertilize the grass with their own manure, which has a lot of nitrogen in it. And then he moves them to the next paddock. And every day the animals are moving. And it's quite an amazing, it's a mobile farm. There are very few fixed structures on this farm. But what was most meaningful to me about being on his farm, and actually changed my understanding of the human relationship to nature, not just food, was balance their leaves and their roots. And those dead roots then are broken down by the bacteria and the microbes and fungi and worms, and that's how soil is created. Soil is made from the relationship of cattle, grass, and roots, and it grows from the bottom up. And so at the end of the year, not only has this farmer taken all this beautiful food off the farm, large amounts, this is a very productive farm, large amounts of grass-fed beef and eggs and chickens and pork and rabbits, but at the end of the year, there is more soil, not less. There is more biodiversity, not less. There is more fertility, not less. And you see, this is a radical idea, because most of us have in our heads an idea that our relationship to nature is zero-sum, so that we get what we want, whether it's food or energy or entertainment, and nature is diminished. It's something for us, less for nature, a process of subtraction. And what a truly sustainable farm demonstrates, proves, is that this is not necessarily the case. That there are ways to organize our farms, and probably our lives, where nature is improved rather than diminished. And there is an expression in English called the free lunch. And it turns out there is a free lunch, if we only knew how to cook it.
E essa experiência com a terra é um dos pilares do livro, né? Como eu disse, você organiza o seu livro a partir dos 4 elementos: água, terra, fogo e ar, né? No capítulo da terra, você ainda fala muito dos micro-organismos, né? Que a gente já conhece a partir do queijo, da cerveja, mas você mostra como as excessivas, os processos industriais estão retirando a nossa exposição a bactérias necessárias, aquelas que a gente deveria estar tendo contato e estamos nos separando. Quais são essas bactérias? Que são os tutores, né? Como você chama, né?
Yeah, one of the For me, one of the fascinating things I learned about in doing this book, in the last section, I learned about the importance of microbes. You know, like many people, I grew up fearing bacteria because bacteria cause disease, and it does. I mean, 1% of bacteria make us sick. But it turns out that we are highly dependent, as that soil on that farm is, on bacteria to help us make our food and to keep us healthy. And I learned something astonishing, which is that 90% of the cells in your body don't belong to you. They belong to bacteria that lives on you and in you. And that those bacteria are not just freeloaders. They're not just there getting a free ride. They're performing essential functions for you. They're helping you digest your food. They're tuning or educating your immune system, teaching it how to recognize friend and foe so you don't have allergies and things like gluten intolerance. They are creating vitamins. They actually take, the bacteria in your large intestine actually take the food you eat, if you're eating the right kind of food, and create essential fatty acids, vitamins, vitamin B, for example. So they're critically important to us, and we didn't know this. And so we haven't been taking very good care of them. As you suggest, industrial food, that classic, you know, McDonald's meal with the soda and the French fries, feeds your body, but leaves very little for the bacteria, who their favorite food is fiber, plants, and you don't get that with fast food. And so if you're not feeding your gut bacteria, you are much more likely to suffer from allergies. You're much more likely to be inflamed. You're much more likely to be obese and have type 2 diabetes. And I think we will learn in the next few years that of all the problems with the Western diet that we've been worrying about, you know, we've worried about the sugar, we've worried about the fat. What we probably should have been worrying about most was the fact that it was starving our gut bacteria. And that because that's what processed food does. It's very interesting. One of the ways we learned this was in our study of mother's milk. You know, mother's milk is nature's perfect food. It's the only food that has been designed by natural selection. It's everything a baby needs to live. So it's worth studying if you want to understand what humans need to live. And for many years we've been trying to simulate it with infant formula. And we've never gotten it right. At first we thought you needed protein, carbohydrates, fats, and the babies would be fine, but you gave them that and they died. And then we figured out, oh, you need vitamins too, so we'll put some vitamins in. And they still didn't do very well. And then we realized, you know, you need different kinds of fats. You need omega-3 fatty acids, so we put that in, and they did better. But there was a mystery about this milk that was only recently unpacked, and that is that about 40% of mother's milk consists of a sugar, it's called an oligosaccharide, that the baby cannot digest. The baby lacks the enzymes you need to digest this sugar. So what is it doing there? 40%. Well, they recently figured out it's there to feed the gut bacteria and encourage the right kind. So nature designed its perfect food with the bacteria in mind, not just the baby. And I think we're going to need to design our food in the same way. So we're no longer starving those very important parts of your body. 90%.
E, bom, infelizmente não podemos nos alimentar mais de leite materno para sempre, né? Então, você...
No, but we can eat plants.
No seu dia a dia, como é você